this material, as excited as I am to teach you this material. It is a lot of fun, and honestly, I look forward to every month because it's a new opportunity to bring some new people into this cult we call 3D. It is super fun. I'm hoping you're going to enjoy it. Something I do want to put up there right up front before we even get started. This class is way harder than anything you've had so far. Let me say that again. This class is a lot harder than anything you've had before. Not that you can't handle it, but you got to make the time for it. Does that make sense? To kind of make it up as you go along, stuff something under the door at the last minute and you still get a decent grade. That doesn't happen anymore. We are in the very first class of really the rest of your hunt for your career. Does that make sense? So if I don't set up the precedent for what the school is looking for, I have failed at my job. Does that make sense? So we are going to have a good time. We are going to learn some highly technical material, and I'm going to do my best to make it fun when we do it. But you still have to actively engage the material in order to be successful, right? And the reason I bring this up is because, you know, the classes prior to this one is material you've been exposed to before. So you're already pretty familiar with it. Nothing is brand new, so you can kind of skate by. And there are many classes where you can just kind of like Google the information later and get what you need. So you don't really have to pay attention during class time. You can do it when you feel like it. This is not that at all. Does that make sense? The information I'm dispensing to you, you really can't get anywhere else. And so you've got to be dialed in and have your A game when you're in here with me. There's two places. We have the lecture environment and we have the lab environment. If you're in the lecture environment, that's in here with me now. We're talking. We have activities to do. We have stuff to talk about. You've got to own this material in order to be successful when you go to the lab environment. If you're in my, what you guys are going to be doing, again, this is your lecture. This is the only time you have, so you got to pay attention to the best of your ability and write stuff down, because really, again, you're not going to get this information elsewhere. You can't really Google it later. Does that make sense? Very few people really tackle this stuff at the beginning stages, and that's where we're at. So you really have to be dialed in every day, and I recommend very, 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 very highly you write stuff down. Even if you've never written stuff down in your life before, this is the class where you're going to need to write stuff down. My preference is that you write it on paper because you can draw pictures and you can make arrows. So if there's something you don't quite recognize, you can draw a picture of it, you know, and for me, I'm a visual guy, so I need pictures. They really help me a lot, and they make a big difference. And again, as a species, we've been learning by writing stuff down for thousands of years, and it works really well. And that's because you're combining the thought process of your mind with the kinesthetic element when you're writing. So that just helps commit that information to your mind more readily accessible and much more firmly. And even if you don't go back and look at your notes, the mere fact that you wrote them helps you to remember the information better. Does that make sense? Okay, because we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Again, this is an accelerated program, which means we go over 3 days worth of material in 1 day. That's how it boils down. Previous classes to this, that wasn't that big a deal. Here's where that changes completely. And again, I'm not trying to scare you. I just want you to know before you discover it yourself. Does that make sense? I want you to get off on a good foot and get going and take this class for all it's worth and do your best and not be surprised by something you weren't expecting. Does that make sense? Okay, so if after week 2 you feel like you don't need to take notes anymore, okay, don't take notes anymore. That's on you. That's fine if you don't want to. Until we get to UV mapping, then you're going to want to take notes again. But point being, but point being, make sure you got a real solid foot of what's going on before you decide you don't need to take notes. This is my personal recommendation. And again, I've been teaching this class for about 8-10 years now. I know what works really well. I have taught many, 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 many students in a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences and skills. And across the board, the one thing that I would say makes the hugest difference is the people who take the best notes do the best in this class. That's hands down. Best note taking, do the best in the class. And it's a chicken and the egg. I don't know which comes first, but what I can tell you is there is a correlation there, definitely. Does that make sense? Can I get a hell yeah there? Hell yeah. Okay, cool. Good. All right. So again, I want you to know where things are coming from right from go, so you're not surprised, because I hate Well, no, I do like some surprises. Educationally, no. Birthday time, yeah. Christmas, yeah. Halloween, definitely. Not so much educational. All right, so again, 3D Foundations, here is where we're gonna get it all started. We're gonna have a lot of fun. You will work hard though, but that's okay. This is what you wanna do for a career. You wanna work in 3D, and this is your first doorway. You gotta get through this one. And again, everything we teach you in here is like a tool or a skill set or something you're gonna put into your utility belt. And then ultimately, once your belt is full of the tools you need, then you're gonna go out and win that job. You're gonna fight and try to win that job. And it is fight and try to win that job. And you're using the skills that we give you. So if your belt is half full, your weapons are dull, and you're not practicing with your skill sets, you're going down. Does that make sense? Okay, so point being, active participation in class, very much so. Please ask questions. I know Brian says this all the time, and I do too. Most people don't have experience in this field, so or with this software in particular. So you're all mostly at the same level. So don't be afraid of what you don't know, because this is a beginner's class. I teach it like you know nothing. So if something comes up that you have no idea what's going on, ask me, please. And what happens is 15 other people will collectively go, oh, thank goodness they asked that, because I was wondering that too, and I'm not going to raise my hand in front of all these people. So be a hero and ask a question, because it really makes a big difference in terms of your understanding and everyone else. Because I might even talk about something I wasn't planning on talking about because of such a great question, and I encourage it. Okay, because I've never picked on, made fun of, harassed anybody who ever asked me a question, except Brian. His questions are always, can we go home now? So I don't entertain his questions ever. Well, that's my thing. Everybody's got their jam. I wear funny shirts. All right, so let's get started with today's material. Like I said, we got a ton of stuff to talk about always, and not enough time to do it. So we need to delve into it. But I do like to go through that little preamble for everybody beforehand, so that we are all on the same page in knowing where we are at, and get into our, you need to have a high level of commitment to do well in this class. So again, welcome to 3D Foundations. Your 3D career starts here. Probably one of your big questions is, who am I going to be working with? Because you're always concerned with, who are my teachers? This is Marcus. When you guys go to the lab environment, whether it's digital or analog, it doesn't make any difference. Marcus is one of the teachers who will be there. At the beginning of this class, when we first put it together, I asked each of the instructors to make a Lego person of themselves. So this is what Marcus thinks he looks like as a Lego person. We'll see if you can pick him out in the lab. But something you'll notice when you look at Marcus and the things he's interested in and so forth, areas of specialty, he talks about modeling, texturing, lighting, and rendering. Those are different disciplines on the CG production pipeline. How many of you guys have ever heard of the CG production pipeline? Couple, okay, that's cool. Yeah, no need to be shy. You can raise your hand, be proud. You've heard that words before. All right, CG production pipeline. It's a lot like an automotive assembly line. At one end, we have an empty frame of a car. At the other end, we have a car we can drive. And what happens is this frame travels through the factory and it stops at a series of stations. Each station has specialized people that do one thing, they do it really well, and they do it really fast, right? So if I'm at my station, I'm the door guy. The car comes to me, I put a door on it. Another car comes to me, I put a door on it. That's my gig, right? Really good, really fast. And that will out a car much faster and higher quality because of the speed and the specialization. Does that make sense? CG is the same thing. We've got storyboards over here, and at the end we've got a movie we can watch or a video game we can play. And the process is very similar. Again, there's a series of specialized positions. Modeling, that's what we're going to be doing in this class primarily, which is right after we get over the reference phase and the design phase, and that's where we get into modeling. This is a polygon modeling class. This is primarily the material we're going to be working with, like wood, metal, or plastic. It's what we build things with. And again, there are other elements of this CG production pipeline that are of interest to Marcus and are interest to you too, because again, different skill sets, different personality types are drawn to these different disciplines. So my hope and the school's hope is that as you move through our production pipeline of education, you're going to get into a class and go, oh, this is the thing that I really like. Does that make sense? We're trying to help you find what it is you're interested in. And again, you'll get a chance to try a bunch of these things and figure out which one is for you. But what I would always say is, even if it's a discipline that maybe I don't want to do this for a job, but you should have an excellent understanding of all the different jobs, even if it's not the one you want, because we are a happy production pipeline and everybody's work affects someone else. So if I know what the person before me is doing, I can do my job better. And if I know what the person after me is doing, I can do my job better to make sure that their job is easier as well. Does that make sense? And that just leads to harmonious creation of 3D, which is what we want. So it's always a great idea to know more than just your thing, and because you can contribute more broadly that way. And to be fair, in a larger company, there's tighter specialization, but in a smaller company, they expect you to do more things. And the more things you know how to do, the more valuable you are as a potential employee. Does that make sense? So even if it's something you're not excited about, I would recommend you learn it and understand it well. Does that make sense at all? Okay, good. Yeah, thank you for playing. All right, so this is Marcus. Again, these are things that he's interested in. Feel free to ask these people all about that stuff at any time if you want to, because they love to get into it, even in the open lab for the digital folks. They love to talk about this stuff. This is Sarah. That's right, we have a girl too. Yes, and she's into cats. Again, if you take a look at her areas of specialty, she actually knows quite a bit about animation and rigging. In fact, that's where she came from, but we got her enough modeling as well that she's an excellent instructor in that also. But for those of you who have interest in animation and or setup and rigging, she's an excellent resource of information. So definitely tap into these folks. Sitting over here behind the computer running the wizardry of electronics is Brian. He is also a course director of this class and helps out tremendously, not only with the open lab sessions for my digital friends and my analog friends as well, but he is a resource, and we'll talk more about that when we get to it. But it's basically 24/7, hey, I need some help, or I feel like helping somebody else because I'm pretty good at this, a little environment for you to go to. And believe me, you need all the help and or feedback you can get in order to ensure success. So again, this is Sarah. There's a lot of fun stuff about her you can find out, and that's what she thinks she looks like as a Lego person. And then you probably would have picked out me. I didn't even have to tell you. In terms of things I like. In terms of the CG production pipeline, I think the whole thing is pretty dang cool. And there's not really an aspect of it I don't like. There's certainly parts of it that I feel I really wouldn't want to go to as a job every day, but I could do the work if I had to.
Daniel says, nice shirt.
Thank you, Daniel.
Nice Lego band shirt.
I like your taste in shirts. You know what? Most people didn't realize that this is actually 2 dancing monkeys. Yeah, that's right, in that design. So kudos to Daniel in picking that out. But that's me. I'm doing my thing. All right. The next thing you're probably wondering is, what the heck are we going to be doing in here? Well, just like when we're first learning to draw, we start with still life, right? We learn to draw objects so that we can learn, understand, and know objects and how they react to light, because without a strong understanding of reality, we cannot create plausible fantasy. Does that make sense? Because we've seen plenty of movies with monsters in it that don't look realistic, spaceships that look ridiculous, right? It's pathetic. And that's because the fantasy they've created is not heavily enough steeped in reality, so we don't buy it. Does that make sense? So just like we need to learn still life in terms of understanding how light behaves with surfaces, the way surfaces behave, textures, how does that all interact with each other? Until we own that information, we can't make great fantasy. So just like learning how to do still life, we are going to be modeling objects from our everyday world. We call them assets because they are all aspects of something that we're trying to build. Again, whether it's a video game or a movie, it doesn't make any difference, but we are building these assets. And of course, we are going for accuracy as one of our guidelines as to how successful you were with any given object that you were trying to build. Unfortunately for everyone in this room, the standard for quality is perfect. Is that tragic or what? At this stage of 3D, the standard is perfect, sadly. Now, there's a lot of other things that are very important that you have to do, and we're going to talk about those so that you understand exactly what it is we're looking for, but realize I want you to do the best you can, and I don't care if you've been using Maya for 15 years or 15 minutes. You all have to do your best, and we recognize progress. Does that make sense? We take that into account. I know the overwhelming majority of you are brand new to this, and that's great. I don't mind at all. But realize that the expectation of the industry is perfect visually. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going for the best we can possibly do. Ultimately, what will happen is you guys are going to build a bunch of objects, and we're going to bring all these objects together and render out a final image, basically a still life of what you've accomplished. And this image you can put on the web, you can print it out and send it to your mom or whatever, hang it on your refrigerator. You will have a still life image of the stuff you've created in just the first month here at school. All right, now in terms of the objects you're going to be building, we actually separate them into different levels. We have the minion level or level 1 assets. We have the level 2 or boss level assets. And we have the level 3 Supreme Poly Commander level of assets. And what happens is we start you out with ones, then we kind of mix the ones and the twos, and then we start getting into the threes. And obviously, the more complex and challenging the object is, the higher up it is on the level chart. So we're going to try to move you through a progression to where you are forced to do more and more difficult objects without making it ridiculous right from go. Because the reality of the situation is you're going to grow more from building things that are a little bit out of your league than to stay with safe stuff. Does that make sense? Much more progress when you have to push yourself. And that's a good thing. So that's the way we set it up. And ultimately, you guys will be able to build your own Lego person, because that is a level 3 asset that you can choose from. And let me tell you, I think just about everybody can identify with these crazy little guys. And of course, you have to make totally awesome accessories if you're going to have Lego people. All right, any questions about what we're building, what we're doing, the goal of the class, making that final render? No, we're good? Utter silence? I'm either great at this, Brian, or they are terrified. Which do you think it is? In the middle? Thank you. I appreciate your vote, Brian. I can always count on Brian. All right, so let's take a look at how we grade, because this is really important to you and to me that we all understand. They do, like almost right after I say it. We'll see how long these guys hold on to it. Do you see this category right here? Blue, 34%. Okay, 34% is the artistic criteria of any assignment you give me. What that means is, does it look right? Does that make sense? We will define, does it look right, a number of different ways. We will give you terms and you can figure it all out, what it all means. But 34% of your grade is, does it look right? Okay, now, can you pass with a 34? Is it possible? No, you cannot pass with a 34. It's not even remotely possible. So here's the thing you need to understand. If you have built the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life, like I open up the file and I'm like, Brian, come here, you got to look at this thing. It could be the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It still only gets a 34. That doesn't pass. Does that make sense? Again, perfection is the industry expectation for quality. So what we have to work on is this part over here, right? High 60% of your grade is technical and organizational aspects of the assignment, okay? Now, the two things you should learn from that is, A, I better pay attention to these things because they'll kill me if I don't. You ignore this, it's not gonna go well, I promise. And the other thing you should note from that is, if I'm not great yet, I'm not gonna be penalized too heavily for that. Does that make sense? Opportunity to grow, opportunity to start at ground zero and do better. Does that make sense? These things are equally important, and that's why they're weighted that way. But these things are very yes, no. Did you do it or did you not? Brush your teeth, wash your face, comb your hair, let the dog out. 4 things. If you do all 4 of them, they each have a percentage value of 25%. What did you just get? You got a 100, right? If you don't let the dog out, you got a 75 and a mess to clean up, most likely. Does that make sense? So when it comes to these things, these are very yes, no, very easy to do. Also very easy to ignore, and that's where it will hurt you. Now, the good news is we made a document for you. It's called the Student Self-Grade Document. It's in the download section of FSO, and it lists for you on a week-by-week basis the yes, no things I need you to do. You follow that list, you're going to do great. If you ignore that list, it will show in your grades. Does that make sense? Please follow the list. It's not that hard, I promise. So make sure we're doing these things, this will come. But if you do these, and these are yes, no, you don't have to be an artist for these at all. If you do these and just a little of that, you're going to pass. Does that make sense? The goal is not pass, the goal is great, but you've got to pass, right? So be aware of where the points are and what they mean. Yes?
So you said the construction criteria is based on the look, right?
Yes.
Is that something that the technical and organizational are based on, or is it just, is it neat and is it?
There's a variety of things we're going to delve into, and we'll go through them one at a time because I never make you guess, because I basically explain to you one topic at a time exactly the things that I'm looking for and show you examples of it so that you can't miss. But it's things like naming the file right, which you might think, well, duh, you got to name the file right. But there are some people who are like, well, I'm an artist. It doesn't matter what I name my file. Au contraire. If you are building an asset that's going to go into a game engine, right, and you don't name it properly, the engine doesn't recognize it, the game doesn't run. Does that make sense? So is it uppercase or lowercase? Does that make a difference? Does it make a difference on your password? For shizzle. So it makes a difference here too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's going to be little things, but they are important. They seem little because we are not just artists making art for ourselves. It's art for hire. And where art meets business, business wins because they're writing the checks. And if you want to eat, you do it their way, on their exactly the way they want it, even if they're wrong. Does that make sense? That is the animal. Know it, because otherwise it will eat you. Yes. Yes. No, you won't need the tablet in here. That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking. You don't need that in here necessarily, but you will. Well, you might need it in lab. What I would preface that by saying is, in order to use this application, you definitely need a 3-button device to operate it properly, Maya. So whether you've got a mouse that you're utilizing with 3 buttons on it, or you're using the pen on your tablet with the 3 buttons to make it work, either one is fine, but you're gonna need one of those. Does that make sense? Because otherwise you can't do the work. Please don't try to do Maya on the trackpad. And if your plan was to do Maya on the trackpad, today's the one and only day you'll be able to get away with that, most likely. But be ready for us on Wednesday with either having configured your pen from your tablet to do the work, or pick up a mouse for $7. They're not that expensive. They're right next to the candy bars. So when you're in the checkout line, pick up a mouse too. Either is fine. If you're like, well, which one do I do? If you've not done either one, I would go with the pen just because it's better for you ergonomically. The mouse is a bit dangerous in that it can lead to carpal tunnel syndrome, but only with some people. But if you're like, I've used a mouse my whole life, I got to use a mouse, that's cool. I get it. I do too. So I only use the pen when I'm actually painting textures. That's when I do that. So either or, but if you have no preference whatsoever, I would go with the pen. Thank you for asking that, by the way. Yes.
That's the pen that came with the tablet.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Another very good question. I'm sure some of you are going, dang, do I have a tablet and a pen? What kind of pen is he talking about? Ballpoint or? So this is why we ask those questions, because everybody wins when you ask a question.
One thing about the wax tablet though, I found out that it is not
Yes, you do have to set it up. It doesn't work automatically. Very few things in life do. And when they do, they don't really work all that great either anyway. But the good news is we can help you with that. When you are in lab today, that's one of the things we can help you with. So, oh, sorry. Yeah, the question was, or the statement was the fact that the pen does not come right out of the box and work with the tablet and Maya. You have to actually configure it to work. So you can either Google it if you were in my digital class, and it will explain how do you set up the 3 buttons on the pen. Actually, if you're analog, you can do it too. Or you can go to a Google Hangout session or an open lab session with Brian, Marcus, or Sarah and get the assistance there. And if you're in my local class, you can get help in the lab on a daily basis as well. So however it has to happen, doesn't matter. It will need to happen, but it's not something we can't do. So yes, excellent statement. You had a follow-up? Well, go ahead, Brian. Yep.
And they have the settings for mine. Okay.
Yep.
So tell them online.
No.
I typed it in.
Did you? Okay. And the reason we suggest you use Autodesk as a website, as a guide for your Wacom tablet instructions, it's their product. You know what I mean? They're going to have more of an inside skinny on how to do it, what works best with their stuff. You know, does that make sense? You wouldn't go ask somebody else what they think. And I'm sure the pen people have their own opinion too. But for people who have to use Maya with the pen, they're going to be the best resource. Does that make sense? Okay, so thank you. You guys both get points for that, figuratively. All right, so we get this criteria thing. Okay, looks good, organized, technical. Okay, different things we're looking for. Many opportunities to earn points for those who are paying attention. All right, class structure. There's lecture and there is lab. We've got 2 environments. The first is the lecture environment. You're in the lecture environment right now. Even you sitting at home watching TV and listening at the same time. You should be watching just me. But in terms of the lecture environment, we are here for 2 hours. We will be here on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I will be talking to you and explaining to you tools and techniques, strategies, theories, and bad jokes. And what will happen is, as we're going, we will have little things I call lecture activities. What's going to happen is I will basically talk to you and give you a brick of information, and then we will have a little activity that we do together. And the activity we do together is based on the stuff we just talked about. Does that make sense? So if you're listening, paying close attention and writing instructions down, as soon as I go, okay, let's go to the activity, you know what you have to do because you already have the instructions. So if you're just sort of sitting there and letting the information bounce off your head and you're hoping, I hope some of this sticks because I'm thinking about Fortnite, but whatever is going on, you're gonna have a hard time with the activity. But what these activities do is give you a break from me talking and you get to actually do stuff. But also it's a reinforcement of class material. So if I say, okay, it's time to do an activity and you're like, what do I do first? You're not using a very effective strategy for learning. Does that make sense? It is an immediate response to you're not approaching learning this material properly. You need to change it. Does that make sense? On an activity by activity basis, you know how you're doing in this class. Because if you have to ask me a question that's not, well, if I do this and that, how will this do that? Oh, no, that's great. That's insightful. But if you're like, I don't even know where to start, okay, you need to change how you are teaching yourself this class. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's a great way to tell how you're doing. Because if you can do the activities, you're doing great. So do the activities, obviously. Now, in addition to these in-class activities, we also have what we call a skill check. Every class has a skill check. Well, 10 out of 11. And what that is information, activity, information, activity, information, activity. And then at the end of the day, we have this skill check. And the skill check is basically a mini activity for you to do on your time, whether it's in lab or at home or on a bus or wherever you happen to be. It's an assignment for you to do that basically encompasses everything we talked about that day. So there'll be a lecture 1 skill check. And if you can do lecture 1 skill check, you understood what we talked about today. You're good. Does that make sense? Again, verification. Do I know what is going on in this class? Can you do the skill check without any help? Yes? Okay, then you're doing great right now. No? Okay, you need more help. Come see us in the Google Hangout. Ask questions when you get to the local lab. Does that make sense? That's the barometer. That tells you how well you're doing. So if you're having trouble, the sooner you come get help, the better. This is not a, I'll get it later. No, you need to get it now. So if you're not getting it, come see us, because that's what we're here for. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, in terms of the skill checks, they actually add up also. In terms of the skill checks, oh, and actually before I go into the weekly turn-in, skill checks are worth 1% of your grade. And they're not that hard, again, but they are representative of what you learned on a day-by-day basis. But the good news is, if you do all 10 skill checks, that gives you 10% added to your grade. So if you got a C in this class, guess who just got a B? You got a B in this class, guess who just got an A? Does that make sense? It's virtually free 10% added to your score. So you want to do all these skill checks on one level because that means you know what the heck's going on, but on the other level, it's gonna help your grade. Does that make sense? Because if you do the work, you're gonna be fine. It's not that bad. But that's how we see how we're doing. So if you're missing the skill checks, and I know Brian will vouch for me on this one, if you take a look at people who don't do particularly well in this class, they're the ones who aren't doing the skill checks. There is a direct correlation. So you do the skill checks, you're gonna be okay. Now, we do 3 skill checks a week, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then at the end of all those skill checks, we have a weekly assignment. And the weekly assignment is basically taking what we learned in skill check 1, skill check 2, and skill check 3 and said, boom, here it is. This is the big game. You've been practicing. We've had 3 practices this week. Bang, here's the big game. Here's your chance to show us what you've learned. Do the skill checks, you're gonna be able to do the weekly turn-in. Not that it's gonna be easy. The weekly turn-ins are tough, but this is how you prepare for it. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions on that? Lecture material activity, skill check, skill check, skill check, skill check, weekly turn-in. Those weekly turn-ins are worth between what, 12 and 15% of your grade for each one of those? You're gonna wanna do well on those. Yes?
So would these skill checks be things that you do outside of class time?
Not necessarily outside of class time. You can do them in lab if you're in my local class, you know, because you guys have lab every day that you have lecture. So you get an opportunity to delve right into what it is we talked about today, that same day, which I recommend very highly. But you can do them at home. And the beauty of these activities that I give you guys to do in class and the skill checks I have you do at the end of each class, you don't have to save over the original file. You can keep that original file and redo them as many times as you need to and get better at all of these things. Because working with Maya is just like anything you do in your life. If you practice, you get good. There are no magical powers, you know, no midichlorian count or anything like that that helps you get good at this. If you practice, you get good. You want to hit a baseball, you go to the batting cage. You hit a couple hundred balls, you're going to get good at hitting the ball. It's the same thing. And thank goodness for that, right? I mean, we're all special because our moms told us, but you don't have to be especially special to be good at this. But you do have to want to be good at this, and you got to be willing to work hard to be good at this. Those are 2 very important things. Does that make sense? Okay, so there is going to be some work, but if you like it, it's not work, it's fun actually. Make sense? Excellent question, thank you. All right, so the other environment we have is the lab. If you're in my local class, it's a live environment with at least two instructors in there with you. And this is where you're gonna get the real, hey, can you sit down with me? I'm having a problem. Can you watch what I'm doing and give me some pointers on how I can do this better? Or, hey, here's an assignment I'm thinking about turning in. Could you take a look at it and tell me what I need to do to get a better grade? What, you do that? Oh yeah, we do that. There are very few classes will let you show your work to the instructors before you turn it in, and we will give you feedback on how to do better. That sounds like more work. Okay, you might have to do a little bit more work, but do you want a better grade or not? I mean, That's your call. But we will always tell you what you need to do. And it's not necessarily full laborious stuff. Sometimes it's super easy, just something you overlooked. If you wait to the last minute to work on your assignments, you don't get feedback. You don't get feedback, you get what you get. Does that make sense? After it's been graded, that's it. No fixies, no do-overs, credit. Does that make sense? So you got to get it first time. So ask in advance. Do the work in advance. Week 1, it's really hard because you're just learning this stuff, so you can't really do anything in advance. But starting week 2, you should be working on your weekly turn-in like as soon as you finish working on your week 1 turn-in. Does that make sense? Whew, week 1 is done. Excellent. What am I doing for 2? Get started on it because everything takes way longer than you think. CG, I have a conservative multiplier times 6. However long I think it's going to be, I'm going to multiply it by 6. And that's usually pretty close. So give yourself the time. Most people who don't do well in this class, in this field, are people who don't give themselves enough time to be successful. Because it's not like they can't figure it out or not able to figure it out. They just couldn't allocate enough time to it to do a decent job. Does that make sense at all? So it really is time. You got to put the time in. But if this is what, again, if this is what you want to do, it doesn't really feel like work. You know, I wake up, grab my Pop-Tart, and I sit down at the computer and I'm eating Pop-Tarts, and before I know it, the sun went down again. I don't know what the heck happened. That's the way it works. You know, no idea what time of day it is, and that's a good sign again. That's what you want. Make sense? Get a hell yeah? Awesome. Okay, good. So get into that lab. And incidentally, if you're in my digital class, you're going to be going to our online lab, which is so easy to get into. One of our activities on FSO, it's called Help. And literally when you click on it, there's a big honking red button that says Help. If you need help, press this button. We're not joking. Press the button and you get launched into the Google Hangout. And it's basically a virtual environment where, you know, other students are in there so you can talk to each other and help each other. There's scheduled times when instructors are in there and you can get valuable feedback on your work and your grades, and, you know, even just get to know who you're working with. So it is an amazing environment. We don't turn off. The doors are open all night, so come on in whenever you want and either help someone or be helped by someone. And it's a great place to hang out and awesome place to make friends and connections. And do not ever, 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 ever underestimate the importance of networking. Does that make sense? Yeah, sadly, it's true. But that's the reality of the game you're playing, you know, and it's one of those things. You might not like the way the rules are being done, but these are the rules of this game. I know some very talented people who are sitting at home without work. I know some very connected people who are marginally gifted, who are working their buns off. I'm going to let you in on a little tiny secret. Don't tell anybody. Life's not fair. Life is not fair. Not even close. The only fair there is the fair you have the control to create. That is the only fair. And I try to make my environment as fair as I can because that is the only amount of control I have. Make sense? Hell yeah? Awesome. Good. All right. So get into that lab. Take advantage. Honestly, they're terrific people, and CG is a great environment. They're really nice people. Everybody's trying to help everybody else. It's a fuzzy love kind of thing. All right. Just a quick look at what we're looking at for your week 1 objective. What's going to happen is you're going to build for me 3 objects. We have this Maya scene with these cute little pedestals on there that Marcus made. You're going to make objects and bring them into that scene and put them on those little pedestals to show them off. So we can see what you've accomplished over the span of the first week, second week, third week, fourth week. So again, we gave you this part. You just got to bring the objects in that you made. And you can see they don't look devastatingly complicated, right? Or are they? Yes?
We feel like making our own pedestals. That's cool too.
You can make anything you want, but you can't turn it in. You can make anything you wish, and I encourage it. Because here's the thing. You will work harder on the stuff you want to build than you will ever work on something for someone else. Does Does that make sense? Because you want to do that. You're passionate. You love it. And I recommend very, very, very highly you build as much stuff as you can in your time. But remember, you have to do the work for me and Brian first. And then with the time you've earned, and you have to think of it that way, the time you've earned, you then create the art that makes you happy. Because you do have to feed the artist. Believe me, I get that. You've got to make X-Wings or you're going to go nuts. Okay, I'm right there with you. But the art you make for yourself will not necessarily feed you right out of the box. You got to do the work where it's supposed to be done first. And then, again, with the time you've earned, then make stuff that, and then you make something epic, and then that goes on your demo reel, and then that earns you more work, which then gives you the opportunity to do your own work with all the money you've stored up like a miser from working for somebody else. Does that make sense? So be very careful, because that is distracting. Like I said, sun goes up and down and you don't even realize it because you're having such a good time. But yeah, get your work done. You got to get your have-tos done before your want-tos. So if you listen, my mom always told me this, if you listen to yourself talk, you know what you have to do, right? I have to finish these models before the week 1 turn-in or Steve's going to beat me. I want to make X-Wings so I can make them fight. I have to finish my week 1. Okay, all right. So that's what I got to do first. So just listen to yourself talk and you'll know what you're supposed to be doing, right? Okay. So there's your week 1 turn-in, a quick look at what it looks like. Let's talk about today's material. We are going to talk about the project folder creation process. And in terms of project folder creation, not overly complicated, but you're going to have to do this on your own week 3. So we talk about it week 1, you're going to have to do it week 3. So make sure it's in your notes. So when you get to week 3, you don't go, how's that go again? You'll have it, you know. So we're going to talk about folder creation. We are going to discuss the Maya interface. It is very big and very confusing and intimidating. So we're going to try to break it down to where it makes sense to you. Broad strokes, and we will fill in the detail as we go. We're going to talk about the importance of reference, and then we're going to discuss polygon primitives, which are basically the foundation that we build everything off of. Those simple primitives is what we start with. And you'll see it's a lot like illustration. You start with simple volumes and draw the detail you need. Modeling is very similar. We start with simple primitives and we build everything we need from that. All righty? Are we ready? All right, I got one person ready. There we go. Thank you for playing. All right. Here we go. Let's talk a little bit about file management, and here's where that naming thing comes in. Again, when you are working as one member of a much larger team, things get lost, things get disorganized, things don't work right together because their naming is not correct. It causes all kinds of chaos. And work that cannot be found is the same as work you didn't do. So we got to make sure we name things properly and organize them properly, structure them in terms of how they need to be delivered, because it makes a big difference. That is part of the job. All right. So again, without organization, we have chaos. So we're going to get into the very important aspect of creating and setting projects, and then again, naming concepts as we go through those things. All right. Now, again, the whole goal is to streamline processes, to be as efficient as possible, because we work in teams. So it's really important that everybody's on the same page in order to efficiently get through anything. Because literally in this line of work, time equals money. You can look at any project and figure out the dollar value per hour it is taking to make whatever it is you're making. It can be calculated. So we are always on that. All right. So first thing that we are going to do is a fun little activity. If you already have Maya installed, and incidentally, just by a show of hands, how many of you guys have Maya installed already? Oh, I think this is one of the best classes ever. Very good. I'm so proud of you guys. Good job. I can't tell you how many classes I've had where less than half actually have Maya installed. Like, come on, it's in the instructions. And the reason you need this stuff is because this is what we're working with. So you need to have the tools. So again, that whole section, class overview, please do all of those things. And I don't mean just check them off real quick so you can say you're done and get right to your Pop-Tarts. Read that stuff. Be familiar with it and understand it. Because basically we're playing a game and the rules of that game are in there. You don't play a game if you don't know the rules. unless you just want to give other people your money, right? You don't play poker for the first time, right? So point being, make sure you know what's going on FSL. We're gonna do an activity. Anytime you see this slide with me and Sarah and Marcus, he's doing push-ups, I'm running, and Sarah's lifting weights, you know we're gonna do an in-class activity, which is something we all do together, and that makes sure we understand what the heck is going on, at least to some degree. All right, so we're gonna talk about the creation and setting of projects, because it's más importante. Let's get Maya up here. Good morning, Maya. Here we go. Now, in terms of the process of creating a project folder, these are the steps. And anytime you hear me say these are the steps, that's stuff you should probably write down. These are the steps. From your main menu items, go to File and click with the left mouse button. From File, if you drag down, you will see a menu item called Project Window. And this is how we make a new project. So let's say I decide, oh, you know what? I want to make a cool robot. It's this thing I've been wanting to do forever. So first I have to make a project folder system in order to do the job. Now, how many of you guys have ever worked in an office before? Anybody? A couple of you? Okay. And when you're working in an office, you're talking about filing cabinets, right? Filing cabinets is how we organize stuff. There's a whole bunch of drawers and folders and all this stuff stuffed in there. You know, for some legal purpose, we got to hang on to it all. But the point is, we have a whole bunch of drawers, we have a whole bunch of folders, and that's how we organize things. Well, anytime we work on a project in Maya, we also have to be organized. We have to have a folder system in place because there's actually two individuals working on every project you work on. One is you, and the other is Maya. So because you guys are working together, you got to be organized. There are some materials that Maya needs. There are some materials that you need, but you work together to make art. Does that make sense? You're the art, Maya's the math, but without the other half, you can't do the job. Does that make sense? So we need to be on the same page. So we do this by setting up the project, the file folder system for anything we want to do, and then we're going to talk about setting the project. First, creation. So we go to Project Window, and we click with the left mouse button. This window pops up. Step 2, upper right-hand corner, the word new. I'm going to be making a new thing, so I click it. Left mouse button again. Here's where we then, number 3, name the project. So you can call it, you know, whatever it happens to be. Cool robot. Now, in terms of the naming convention, you'll notice as I threw the letters out there, I missed a couple. I hate my keyboard. Did I tell you that, Brian? I'm not a fan. Cool robot. What you'll notice is I put the capital R for the beginning of the second word. Does that make sense? That lets you know that that's another word. Or if you want to, something that you can do is go in there and put a little spaceroo to separate the words, a little underscore. Does that make sense? Reason being, machines don't like spaces because a space is a non-character. So sometimes it can goof up machines. Does that make sense? So you don't want to do that. So get a little underscore in there, capitalize the first letter of the second word, whatever you got to do. You can even mix those up. But you need to make it legible, but give it characters it can work with. Does that make sense? All right. How many of you guys have the new keyboard, just by a show of hands? The new keyboard on Maya, or on your Apple. Looks like you got the new one. Ugh, I hate the new keyboard. I don't know if they changed the spacing or what, but I'm always hitting the wrong letters, and that key goes down like hardly at all. I like a nice responsive keyboard. I find it irksome. Anyway, my own issues aside. Name the file properly, okay? Step 4. I know, I have to talk about it. I'm not really good. You know, if I just stew, I just get grumpy. You know, and it just comes out later when I have gin. So it's better off if I talk about it. So name it properly. Step 4, click accept with the left mouse button. And then I set mine, actually, I didn't set mine, I'll do it again. You'll see right here, it says, right under where I named it, it tells you where it's gonna go. And this is a path for those of you who are unfamiliar with that. Users, I'm one of the users. It's going to my documents folder. There's a Maya folder, and then there's a projects folder, and then that's where this will appear. Does that make sense? It's almost like a series of directions. Left on Maple, right on Connecticut, left on Wisconsin. Sorry, I was in DC this weekend. But so just to make life easy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change where this is going. And I'm going to send it to my desktop just so you can see it. Cool Robot. And you'll see there's a little yellow folder here, which is kind of like take me to where you want me to go. Is what that says. So I'm going to click on the yellow folder and I'm going to tell it to go to my desktop specifically. And that's where it will send it. So if I hit select with my left mouse button, you'll see the new path is to my desktop, and I hit accept. And again, there's a whole bunch of other folders in here, but just leave those as they are. Those are the default folders in Maya, and that's what you want to do, is leave them at their defaults, because that's where Maya's going to go to look for what Maya needs. And I hit accept, and then what you'll see is you've created this new folder, which inside has these very specialized folders, as well as the workspace icon, and that's basically what launches your interface. And again, all of these folders have jobs, some of which are for you and some of which are for Maya, but you need them all for a given project that you're working on. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah there? Okay, again, not an overly complicated process, but an important one. The very next thing is going to definitely impact you, and that is setting your project. And this is critically important because we're going to be doing a lot of different projects. Much like in the industry, people are always working on multiple projects. One of the key things you have to do is let Maya know what you want to work on right now. And what we do there is we set the project. And basically that's how we explain to Maya, this is what I want to work on now. I want to work on Cool Robot. I know I was working on silly stuff for Steve, but right now I want to work on Cool Robot. So we set the project. This is totally different from opening a file. Again, a source of conflict for people new to Maya. Setting the project is just explaining to Maya what you want to work on. Then you go open the file. Does that make sense? Gesundheit. So step one, we set the project. Again, inside Maya, we go to our main menu item file. Click on it with the left mouse button. Right below project window, you will see set project. So we click on that. That's step number 2. Click on set project. And then Maya will say, okay, what project do you want to work on? And you can navigate to whatever one you want to. You can go anywhere you want to and find the file. My file that I want to work on is on my desktop. So I go to my desktop, and there's Cool Robot right there. And I only have to select it with one click. I don't have to double click and go inside. Not necessary. I don't need to go in here and pick anything out in particular. Just the outermost file for the specific thing I want to work on. And then I hit set in the lower right-hand corner, left mouse button. Boop. Now, every time I save my a file, it's going to go right to that file folder. I know where it is because I set my project. Every time I'm looking for something that I want to bring into this file, it's going to be in that file folder because I set my project. When I bring image planes in to help me with this modeling process, Maya's going to look in the appropriate folder because I've set my project. Does that make sense? Many good things happen when you set your project. Many bad things happen when you forget to set your project. So right after you launch Maya, one of the first things you do is set your project so you don't miss that. Does that make sense? Okay, because I hate losing files. It's frustrating. So this helps out a lot with that. Let's keep organized. You and me, Maya, let's do it. All right, was everybody able to successfully create a project folder? All right, and everybody set their project? Great. And you can tell if you set your project properly when you go to save a file. If you go to File, Save Scene As, and click that with the left mouse button, the save window opens up and you will see the path to your project, and it will say your project, whatever it is, and then the scenes folder, because that's where Maya saves your Maya files, in the scenes folder. So I know I've set my project properly because no matter how I save it, it's going to go there. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Awesome. Okay, because that's going to be very important when it comes to saving stuff. See? Saving stuff. And I save it. And then guess where it is? In my Cool Robot folder. In my scenes folder. Saving stuff. Yes! Make sense? All right, cool. Very important to know where the heck your stuff is. Good things happen when you know where your stuff is. All right, next, we're going to talk about Maya's interface. It's very important that you understand what's going on there. Again, that interface is very intimidating. There's a lot of stuff going on there. So what we're going to do is talk about the different parts of the interface, what those things are to a certain degree and what they do. And what this will help you with is first figuring out what the heck everything is and where it goes. But what's really going to help you with is starting to learn the verbiage of working with Maya, because Maya is its own language. And I want you to learn the terms for it so that when you ask me a question, I know what you're asking me because you're using the right terms. And when I answer you, you know what I'm talking about because you've understood and used the right terms as well. And then we can have a conversation because it literally is its own language. Make sense? Hell yeah? Awesome. So let's learn about Maya. Here we go. All right. Maya's interface. Where are you? There you are. All right. Now, as I alluded to earlier, these are our main menu items across the top here. These main menu items are basically areas where we can go to find tools or actions. Examples of tools and actions from our world. An example of a tool would be like a hammer, a screwdriver, scissors. These are tools. Examples of actions would be like glue these things together, cut these things in half, make a hole in that. Does that make sense? That's where we house these things, tools and actions. To access them, all you have to do is click on them with the left mouse button, and then the tools and the actions drop down. The various tools can be chosen by name, and we'll talk about these little pictures over here in a second. But what is really cool is that with each tool or action, in many instances, there's a little box on the way right-hand side here. This little box is the options box for that tool, because many tools can be used in a different way. For example, hammers drive nails in as well as pull them out. It just depends on how you're holding the hammer, what it's doing. Options box gives you the ability to change how you're holding the hammer, as it were. Does that make sense? So if you're ever trying to figure out why a tool's doing something, or are there any options on how to use this tool, you click on that little box and it opens up with magical music. It opens up the options to that tool. And what's great about it is if you come over here, you'll see there's an edit section you can click on and reset a tool. So if it's doing things you don't recognize, you can reset it to its default settings, which is very helpful. But what's also super nice is if there are any instructions on how to use that tool, it's in there too. You got a little help section. And as long as you have an internet connection, you can click on help and it will launch. It will launch, boop, here we go. It will launch the instructions on that given tool. So you get pictures and text that talk about how the tool works and different options and how you can play with them. And then fun related topics that you could branch out from. So again, another amazing resource to help you with the tool, even one that I haven't shown you yet. You can use the help documents that are built right into Maya to access them. Make sense? Hell yeah? All right, so options box. We love it. All right. And of course, whatever options you want to play with, you can make adjustments to or whatever. All right, let's take a look at the next thing down, the status line. The status line is how we explain to Maya what kind of job we're trying to do. Now, Maya is a very complicated application that does all kinds of really cool stuff. But It's impossible to have all of those tools and all those actions visible at one time. For example, let's imagine Maya is an application that builds houses, okay? Top to bottom, if you want a house, Maya can build it. But the problem is, do you use the same tools for shingling the roof as you do for painting interior walls? Are those the same tools? No, they're definitely different, right? We're talking drop cloths and paintbrushes, right? Versus crowbars and trowels and stuff like that. So obviously we've got different tools for different jobs. So what we have to do is explain to Maya, are we doing roofing or are we doing interior painting? So we can explain to Maya what kind of job we're doing using the status line. If you click with the left mouse button, these are the different things we can set Maya for. That way we can only see associated with that job. Does that make sense? If I'm doing interior painting, I set it for interior painting and I have available paintbrushes, drop cloths, tape, all that good stuff. So what we want to do is make sure your status line is set for modeling, because this is a polygon modeling class and those are the tools we need. Because when you change your status line to something else like animation, you'll notice your main menu items change. Now I see animation things. So if you can't find the tool or the action you're looking for, make sure you're set for the right status line setting, because that's why you don't see the things you're looking for. All right. Now, this area down here, these are the shelf tabs, and we have these cool shelf icons. Now, these shelf icons are buttons, and they're basically shortcuts to main menu items. So for example, if you look up here under Edit Mesh, you'll see there's a tool called Extrude. And you'll see over here, there's a cute little drawing of a button. Well, if you go to the Poly Modeling Shelf tab, you'll see there's a little icon over here, and that's also the button for the Extrude tool. So you can either go to Edit Mesh and go to Extrude, or you can come right here to this icon and get the same thing. It's a little bit faster. Now, the bummer is it doesn't have the name of the tool underneath it. If you put your cursor over it, it'll tell you what the name of that tool is. So that'll give you a hint. But something else you can do is if you hover your cursor over anything in Maya, if you look down here in the lower left-hand corner, right here at the bottom, this is Maya's helpline. And literally, if you hover your cursor over something, the helpline will tell you what that thing is, and it will tell you a little bit about how it works. And if you know what something's called, you can look it up using the help document. So if you're not sure what it is or how it works, you can find things out that way too. So again, these buttons are shortcuts to main menu items. And like I said, you can see that the little buttons are in here, and you start to recognize the ones you use in again and again, and you'll remember them from these areas. All right, let's take a quick look at the workspace, the work panel, the work view. There's a lot of different names for this particular area, but this is our canvas. This is where we create the art. You will notice that there's a little menu above the window as well. Again, you can drop down and go through different options that are associated with this particular window. This window is the perspective window, and it looks like a perspective window because it's got depth. It looks like it's 3D, right? This grid in here makes me think that this isn't just a flat screen. This is like a room I'm in. And that's why it's the perspective camera. Now you can drive around in this camera and navigate through Maya, and it's super fun. So let's say I want to get closer to that cube. There's a couple of different ways I can move within the workspace. If you look at your keyboard right now, you'll see that there is a key called Option. And if you hold down the Option key and the left mouse button, you get the tumble function. And tumble allows you to view an object from any angle. Option and left mouse button. Tumble. Now let's say I'm very far away from this object and I want to get closer. If I hold down the Option key and the right mouse button, I can zoom in, zoom out on an object. Zoom in, zoom out. Right? And that's Option and right mouse button, and slide your mouse. Now, let's say I want to move alongside the object. I want to go left or right, up or down, but I don't want to necessarily get any closer to the object. If I hold down my Option key again, and this time hold down my middle mouse button, I can track or dolly. Again, up or down, left or right, but I'm not getting any closer. So in order for me to look at, work with, manipulate anything in Maya, I zoom, I track, I dolly, I tumble, and that's how I get around in this space called perspective. Does that make sense? Okay. Thank you for playing. Now, in terms of this window, this isn't the only one. What? There's more? Yes, don't act now. There's 3 other ones. Well, actually, there's more than 3, but let's go with 3. If you look in this area here, you will see the saved layouts. These are the saved camera angles in Maya. They're built right in and you can go to them anytime you want. This top icon here is the perspective view, the one we're in now. But there's one right below it called 4 view. And if you click on that, boop, I got 4 views of the exact same thing. Killer. Right. Now, for those of you who doubt it's the same thing, I'll wiggle it just a little bit. Now, you might be wondering, why do I need 4 views of the same thing? Well, I've got a top view, I've got a front view, and I've got a side view. But the difference between this view and those 3, these views are orthographic views. They have no depth. That's why when I look at these objects, they look like squares in these views, and it looks like a cube here. Because depth, vanishing points, those are all aspects of perspective. These windows don't have perspective, so everything is flat or a shape. Does that make sense? Squares. Squares are flat. So it's the same object in all these different views. So again, why do I need to have 4 views of the same thing? Well, if I'm trying to take this sphere and I'm trying to place it directly on top of this cube, perfectly centered, it's kind of hard in my perspective view. But I can use my orthographic views to great skill, and it allows me the precision, because if it looks good here and it looks good here, I know I'm on the money there. Does that make sense? They all work together to help me be more precise. Now, in terms of the windows, it's just like artwork. The bigger the paper is, the more fun and the easier it is to work with. So you want your windows to be as big as you can make them. If you put your cursor over any window and hit the space bar, you go into that window, nice and big. You want to go out to 4 view, you hit space bar again. I'm in 4 view. Now I can choose a different view by just putting my cursor over that view and hit space bar again. Now I'm in that view. And you can just jump around. Jump up, and jump down. Everybody okay? Thank you for playing. I got 1 pulse. All right. It's a lot of information. I told you that. It's going to be like this every day we're together. I promise you. There's always a lot to talk about. And this is just one class. Make sense? Okay. Now, you might be wondering, oh, I like these like arrows and things. How are you doing that? Let's talk about manipulation. We're going to use these icons over here. This area is called the toolbox. The toolbox is how we interact with our art. And there's a bunch of different tools for us to work with. The first one is the selection tool. It looks like an arrow. That's how we select things. Sometimes you just want to select something. You're not necessarily doing something to it. You just want to select it. With the selection tool, I can select objects. This is what a selected polygon looks like. Unselected. Selected, unselected, selected, unselected, selected, unselected. When I select an object, it lights up green, and you will notice that information suddenly pops up over here. When nothing is selected, there's nothing there, but when I grab the object, I know the object's name, I know where it is in space, I have the inputs associated with that object. It's like the story of this thing that I have selected. This area here is called the channel box. The channel box holds information about the selected object. The icon for the channel box is this one way over here. It looks like a stack of pieces of paper. or you'll see the word channel box on a little tab on the side. All right. Now, let's take a look at another tool in here. How about the move tool? I click on this object and I have the move tool. Guess what it does? It moves stuff, right? All right, so in terms of making the objects move, you will notice there's some arrows sticking out of this thing. Those are the axes that the object will move on. When my values are all 0, my object is at the origin. Maya is basically a giant Cartesian grid coordinate system. So if I want to move this object up, I'm using this green arrow. This represents the y-axis. Maya is a y-up application. So if I grab the green arrow with my left hand and raise it up, the object moves up in y. You will notice in the channel box, the value for translate y is increasing. As I go down, it will get smaller. When I go below the grid, it goes negative, like I'm underwater. Now you might be wondering, well, can I plug in a value there? Do I have to use the manipulators? Yeah, you can, absolutely. If I want this object to be 3 grid units above the surface, I press a 3, boom, it's at exactly 3, based on where its pivot point is, right there in the middle. What's a grid unit, you say? What's a grid unit? A grid unit is an arbitrary means of measuring things. If you look, this world here has a giant grid on the floor. Each one of these squares is a grid unit. That grid unit could be an inch, it could be a mile, it could be a gigawatt. I can decide whatever I want that to be. Again, an arbitrary value. Does that make sense? But I have to have some means of measuring. So it's 3 of whatever up now. And any axis I want to move that object on, I just grab the arrows and it moves. And you'll notice that the values change. Again, all zeros puts me where? At the origin, right? The starting point. Okay. Now, you might think, okay, it's really tedious to move things by grabbing these arrows. So slow. Well, the good news is that's not the only way to move stuff. If you want to, you can go to the very center of an object and hold down your left mouse button, and you can drag that object around really fast, right? Wow! The problem is it's not overly precise. So in terms of moving objects, what we typically do is grab it in the middle, move it really fast, and then once we get it ballpark where we want it, that's when we start using our arrows to give us precision placement. Make sense? Okay. So we use all those things together. Incidentally, in terms of the icon you're looking at there, plus makes it bigger, minus makes it smaller. It's a personal preference how big that you want that thing to be. So plus and minus for that. This is the rotate tool. Guess what that does? It rotates, right? I'm not tricking you, right? That's how you rotate things. Oh, let me do it with the cube. It's easier to see. So in terms of rotating this cube, what you will see is if I grab the blue axis, which is Z axis, it will rotate on Z. And you will notice my rotate Z value is increasing. These numbers are degrees. So you could literally plug in, rotate it 45 degrees, and that's what it's going to do. 90 degrees, 60 degrees, 180 degrees. You can plug that in. All right. So again, that's the Z axis. Now I can also rotate on the red axis, which is X. And you'll notice the axes are color coded so that you know which one we're talking about all the time. Green is always Y, blue is always Z, and red is always X. And when it's selected, it turns yellow. And you'll notice that there's this outer light blue one. What's that? If you grab that, it just spins willy-nilly on all axes at once. Does that make sense? It's kind of like grabbing the move tool in the center. It's a little bit messy, but sometimes you want messy. Let's say, for example, I'm animating a meteor hurtling towards the Earth. You want that to be kind of erratic. You might actually use that. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah there? There we go. Thank you for playing. All right. So again, that's the rotate tool. This is the scale tool. The next one down. Guess what that does? Scales things, right? Not like Batman. We're talking size. So in terms of the scale tool, I can scale in X by grabbing the red cube. And you will notice it scales both positively and negatively in X. I can also scale in the Z axis or blue. And it scales both positively and negatively. It does the same thing in Y. Now, what if I want to change the size of the object, but I don't want it to go in both positive and negative? I like the size and shape it's in. I just want to make it bigger. Well, that's what that cute little light blue cube is in the middle for. Left mouse button, drag. Maintains proportion. Make it bigger or smaller. In terms of plugging in values, when you first create something, its scale is 1. 1/1 scale, actual size. So if I wanted this cube to be 3 times bigger, I could literally highlight X, Y, and Z of scale and plug in a 3 and hit enter. And it's now 3 times bigger exactly without altering proportion. All right. Cool. Is that a question? Go ahead. Yeah, if I don't happen to see you, please feel free to say something or stand up or throw something at Brian. I didn't press a button. I scaled with the yellow cube or light blue cube in the center. That makes it bigger overall without changing its proportions. Okay. So I can't always see. I'm somewhat temporarily blinded by that light that Brian lights me with, so sometimes I can't see anything. All right. So that's my scale tool. This area down here is your animation timeline. And we're not going to do any animation in here. I wish we used to do animation in here. But you guys are familiar with flip books, right? A series of drawings. There's a different drawing in each page. And when you show them in rapid succession, your mind creates an illusion of animation through a concept called persistence of vision. We think it's moving, but it's just a change in the illustrations. Think of each one of these stops on the timeline. We call them frames. Each stop is a drawing on a flip book. So if you want to do an animation, 24 frames will give you 1 second of animation. Does that make sense? Okay. This area over here, these are just the play controls for your animation. Play my animation forward, stop. Play my animation backward, stop. Keyframes forward and back. Frames forward and back. Beginning, end. Again, you'll get to those controls when you get to an animation class, but just so you know what they're doing. This area here is Maya's layer editor. For those of you, how many of you guys have used Photoshop before? Okay, if you've used Photoshop, you know Photoshop's power lies within its layers, right? The layer system in Maya is very cool, not anywhere near as cool as the one in Photoshop, but a lot of the premises are the same. We can create layers, hide layers, show layers, template layers, lock layers, those kinds of ideas. It's organizationally driven, not necessarily artistic. Does that make sense? But it does the same kinds of things. So it helps us organize. Alrighty. And again, we talked about this area already. What's that called? Channel box, absolutely. Make sense? All right, this is the, again, just like learning a new language, intimidating at first. There's a lot of stuff, but now, and then as we go into it, we delve into more detail as we go, and you become more and more familiar, and before you know it, you're doing fine. Make sense? Okay. Let's go with the next groovy thing. Where are we at? 6:20. All right. Doot. Let's talk about the 5 phases of modeling for this class. The 5 phases of modeling, the steps we take through polygon modeling with reference, either finding or creation of, doesn't matter which. We block out our primitive shape and form. We model the asset, UV the asset, and that's where we're mapping it for texture purposes. And then we do cleanup on the asset. We're going to talk about each of those stages, but just so that you know, the modeling process takes several steps, and that is the order in which we go. First, reference. Reference is critically important when it comes to modeling. The better your reference is, the faster and the better your model is going to turn out. All right. Again, just like in illustration, quality reference, quality reproduction. And that's basically what we are. We're basically 3D copy machines. Give me a 2D image of something and I will create a 3D version of it and it will look just like the picture. Does that make sense? That's our gig as polygon modelers. But what I'd like you to do to help you in the creation of these 3D objects is every object you're making, try to see the simple primitive form inside of every object you're making. Look for the simple shapes that go together to make these various objects, because it will, just like it will help you draw these objects, that will also help you model these objects. Does that make sense? Okay, because there's a lot of similarities between illustration and modeling. They are very heavily steeped in one another in terms of concept. Because regardless of the shape and the form of the object, organic or inorganic, everything can be broken down to simple primitive shapes. And as a modeler, that's one of the things we need to do. Look at the reference and find the shapes inside, because that's how we're going to be able to build the things we want to build. Except instead of drawing a simple shape like a cylinder or a cube or a sphere, we start with simple primitives, which already do most of the work for us. Again, just like if I was going to draw a telephone pole, I'd start by drawing a cylinder. Well, if I'm going to model a telephone pole, I'm also going to start with a cylinder. They're already made for me though, I don't have to draw them. Not anymore. In the old days, they had to make them one point at a time. Boop. Who can tell me what that is? That is not the Enterprise. Who said that? That is my other ride, the Millennium Falcon. How about this? Spider-Man. And a kitty cat. Yeah, almost without fail, somebody says dog. This is a kitty cat. All right. Now, what you are seeing here is what we call the silhouette of the object, a simple shape that represents, again, the shape of the object. And this is critically important to modeling. When you look at an object, you should know immediately what it is. And a big part of that is silhouette. You should be able to recognize the silhouette of an object by what it is immediately. Job one of the modeler is hit silhouette. You have to. Recognition is so important. That's how strong the silhouette is. In fact, if you look at just the silhouette, you can pick out like different breeds of dog. There's no surface detail on there whatsoever, and you can pick out the different breeds because silhouette is that important. And that's why we have to make sure we hit that when we're modeling. That's job one, silhouette. Now, silhouette is important because that is half of does it look right? You remember that 34% we talked about in your grade? 50% of that 34%, does it look right, is silhouette. Did you hit silhouette? So if this is your reference image, these two models are close enough to the reference that they hit silhouette. In a just the shadowy outline, I see that lamp. You would get the points for silhouette. These objects don't look close enough. They're too far away. Does that make sense? There's too much detail missing. I can't say for sure any of those are definitely that lamp. So if your model looks like one of those three, you miss the points for silhouette. I don't know what object that is you've built for me. Does that make sense? Again, it's very yes, no. Is it close enough in appearance or not? Here's the other 50% of does it look right. Form. Form is surface detail. 3D depth related detail. It is possible to hit silhouette on an object, but not hit the form. Does that make sense? I could recognize the shadow, but go, you know what? Your surface details are not close enough. So let's take a look at some examples there. Same lamp. Here's the reference image I gave you. These two look dang close to that. You get the form points. These guys, too different, too far away, not enough surface detail. You don't get the form points. Does that make sense? Because again, I might recognize it by its silhouette, but feel it falls short in form. So it is possible to get one and not the other. But they are two sides of, does it look right? Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, good. Let's talk about our skill check. All right, skill check for lecture 1. We kind of went through that fast. You guys sure you don't have any more questions? Was I?
Yeah.
You know what happened? I had a cheeseburger before class. Yeah, I don't know what they put. Sorry, have a cheeseburger before class and you too will be doing great. It is, they are magical. Hopefully my stomach feels like that later. All right, let's talk about today's skill check. Again, in terms of things we talked about today and things we needed to do, we talked about the interface, we talked about the tools of manipulation, we talked about the navigation of the windows. So this skill check is going to encompass all of that stuff. Now, in terms of your skill checks and in terms of your in-class activities, we have 2 folders for you guys. Guess where they are? Download section of FSO. Exactly, it's there. So what happens is the in-class folder, it's called the activity file folder. So if you go onto FSO, you'll see there's a folder there called the activity file folder, and that file folder houses all the activities that we do in this class, the ones we do together. There's a second folder, and it's called, ironically, the skill check file folder, and that's where all of your skill checks are. So we're doing a skill check now. So then what I would end up doing if I wanted to do that is set my project to the skill check file folder, because you will have an activity file folder on your computer and you know where it is. That's important. You need to know where it is so you can set your project to it. And I'll have my skill check file folder and I need to know where it is so I can set my project to it, because that will become a big deal starting very next class, making sure you set your project before you start. So I'm about to do my skill check. So I'm going to set my project to my skill check file folder, and I'm going to take a look at the activity on FSO. What? There are instructions? No way. Yep, there are. So let's take a look at them. Let's look at the instructions first. And I know you guys are thinking, instructions? I don't want to look at instructions. I'd rather make it up. All right, let's look at lesson 1, skill check. What the? Did you see that happen, Brian? I didn't touch anything. And it was like, whoop, it did something. I don't know what. I probably destroyed the other side of the earth or something. All right, so lecture 1 skill check. I know they're going to be mad, right? The Build Me project. Again, we talk all about what it is we're trying to do. I'm going to hold on to this reference image because this is going to help me do my job. So first I'm going to minimize Maya here, and I'm going to take this image and I'm going to borrow that. Thank you, image. And again, there's instructions on here on how to name it, you know, because we're going to need to save this because we're turning them in. Remember, they're each worth 1% of your grade, or a free added 1%. So here's my goal. I want to make this dapper dude here called Captain Idaho. This is what he should look like when he's all done. Now, the problem is he doesn't start out that way. If you look in the download section of FSO, you will see there's a file in there called the skill check file folders. So in order to access the Build Me file, I'm going to have to set my project to that file and then open the one I want, because they are 2 different things. Set the project, open the file. You got to do them both, but they are not one and the same. All right, so Steps are for setting the project, which you should know by heart, File, Set Project. Now, I have a ton of folders on my computer. I'm sure way more than you, and that's not a boasting thing. I got a bunch of junk on there. So in terms of setting up my files, I created a folder for this class. It's called 3DF underscore, my name and the year and the month that I'm taking 3DF, so I can find all my stuff. I recommend you do the same. So if I go to my documents folder, which is where it would be a great idea to put these folders and stuff, you will see I have a folder in there called 3DF underscore the year and the month I took the class. I click on it, and inside there, that's where I put my activity file folder. That's where I put my skill check files. That's where I put my asset file folder, which has my level 1, level 2, and level 3 assets, the things that we're going to be building all month, all stuff that we download from the download section. But I want to work on a skill check, so I'm going to go to skill check files and just, again, one click on the folder itself and then set the project. Now Maya knows, oh, Steve wants to work on his skill checks. Okay, cool, let's do that. So now I go to File, Open Scene, and it immediately goes to my skill check file folder, immediately goes to the scenes folder and says, which one of these do you want? We're working on Build Me. So I select Build Me and hit Open, left mouse button. Oh, should I save the changes? No, there's no changes there. Oh my goodness, this file contains mental ray nodes. Try not to panic. Yes, I know this is a student copy. Errors have occurred. Ah! Maya is a huge worry wart. Just click OK, everything's fine. Now, if you look, you see, wow, Captain Idaho does not look like the picture. Well, that's why we have the picture, so that we can compare this to this. So obviously something's going to have to happen to change it into that. Now, there are many pieces here. The good news is when you select a piece, the information pops up in the channel box, right? It tells you what that thing is. What's this thing? It's potato body, right? So if I look at the potato body, you can see it's got little openings in it. There's where the eyes go. That's where the nose goes. That's where the mouth goes. What's wrong with it? He's upside down for sure, right? And if you look at him, you see he's kind of wider on the bottom and narrower on the top. Wider on the top, narrower on the bottom. Obviously, he's upside down. What's the solution here? Rotate tool. So what I'm going to do is go over to the rotate tool, and I'm going to grab the Z-axis and rotate him. And I know he's completely upside down, so I can literally plug in 180 degrees on the Z-axis, and that will flip it completely over. Make sense? Get a hell yeah? Okay. So next thing I got to do, let's say I want to put his nose in there. Now there's like a million pieces in here, and I have no idea which one is where. They're all different sizes. I don't have to model anything. I don't have to duplicate anything. Everything I need is here, but I have to find it. So I can select pieces, and Maya will tell me what that piece is. Or, again, some of these pieces are small and I can't see them. I can use another window in Maya that's going to help me. A window that represents a list of everything that's in that scene so I can find it. If you go to Window, you can choose the Outliner. The Outliner is an amazing window because it basically lists everything that's in your scene. And it's an orthographic window like your other one. So I can either select objects and they will light up in here, or I can select the name in here and it will light up out there. Because all windows in Maya work together, they're just showing you something different. So this is his nose. So when it comes time to move that, and thank goodness it was named properly because then I can find it. Now I can use my move tool and try to line up this nose. I'm going to use my orthographic views. That little peg is supposed to go into that opening, so I'm going to have to turn that thing a little bit. I'm going to go to my side view here. I'm going to rotate my nose and try to move it into place here. Stick my nose in there. All right. How's that nose look? What do you mean? What's wrong with it? It's too small, right? If you look at this guy, he's got quite the honking tomato there, right? This is way too small. That can't be right. The nose takes up almost 2/3 of his face, side to side. So clearly, I need to scale this. I need to make it bigger. But let me show you a trick. If I go to my scale tool, if I scale in X only, right? Does that look right? No, it looks like a torpedo. That's not the solution. And incidentally, Z is the undo key. It's almost like going back in time. So if you do something wrong, if you hit Z, it will undo it. If you keep hitting Z, it will keep taking steps backwards in time until Sarah Connor was born. All right, now, instead of just the X-axis, which was not the solution, I could try the Z-axis. Again, that's not the right shape for the nose. The nose is the right shape, it's just too small. So where should I scale it from? The middle. So I'm going to get this light blue cube in the middle and drag my left mouse button. Now, look at that honker. That's looking better, right? So again, every piece you need is there. You just got to rebuild this guy. Let me get that nose back into place. There we go. So you got to get that nose back in there, looking good. Do your best to match the reference as closely as you possibly can. What this is going to teach you to do is use your windows to flip from window to window, right? Navigation of the windows, perspective view, orthographic views like front or side. It's going to teach you how to use the tools of manipulation in the toolbox, because you've got to rotate things, you got to move things, you got to scale things. And it will teach you to use those windows in concert to help line stuff up for precision purposes. It will teach you to use the channel box so you can find the names, and the outliner, because again, the names are there as well to help you find and position all of these pieces. And then ultimately, once you put Captain Idaho back together, you will be all set. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, so that's skill check 1. Assemble Captain Idaho. Now, in terms of things to do, you guys have a ton of stuff to do. If you are ever in lab and you're saying, and I'm talking to my local class here, if you are ever in lab and you're sitting there going, I'm bored, I don't have anything to do, you're doing something wrong. Does that make sense? There's no way you have nothing to do. It's not possible. You guys have, what, 18 hours of scheduled lab each week? And that's not enough. There's no way you're bored. Does that make sense? Something's amok. So what can you be doing when you are in lab? Everything. And not only working on Captain Idaho, I want you to go through FSO and I want you to do all of those activities. But again, don't just check them off. Understand what each one of them is asking for. Very thoroughly look over your skill checks and what we're asking for with those. Very thoroughly look over your week 1 turn-in instructions, because all that stuff is there. It's all open. You can see it right now. Go see what we're looking for. It's a lot easier to travel the path when you know the destination. So know where you're headed, because each of these pieces will take you a step of the way. Does that make sense? So know where that week 1 turn-in finish line is. Start working. If you are totally ahead, let's say you've gone through everything on FSO, you understand everything, you've downloaded everything, you've installed everything, everything is working great, your tablet has been configured, everything is going really well. If you have done absolutely everything, my advice to you, watch lecture 2. We've recorded the lectures. Each lecture is recorded. You can watch the ones from last month. The jokes are just as bad then as they are now. But the good news is, if you watch those videos, you're already starting to understand the terminology. So when we get to the concepts, you can move right to that right away. Does that make sense? You are ahead of the game. You're going to ask better questions. Does that make sense? Start watching those videos in advance. I recommend it very highly. Again, you've got to own FSO. Find that self-grade document. Start looking at what we're asking for. Because in terms of my checklist, what do I want from you guys? They're listed there one at a time, exactly what we want. And those are the items that we're teaching. So if you don't know what they are, then either we haven't talked about it yet or somehow you missed it. So you should know those terms as we go through the class. Does that make sense? Okay, so please, thank you for playing. Please don't be bored. Be active, pursue the information, look stuff up, start working. Because believe me, time goes very, very fast in here. We are a bit of a time warp. It's crazy. So you will find yourself very suddenly without time. So don't let it sneak up on you. Get the work done in advance. Let us look at it in advance. Then you can make fixes and get a better grade. And that's what we want. We want you guys to do great. Nothing but the highest of hopes for you guys. So give yourself enough time, work hard, and you will be so happy with what you end up with and so proud of yourself for what you've accomplished. Make sense? Okay, cool. Now, we did manage to get through that a little bit quicker than I normally do, that's not bad. But what this is bonus time. Ask me something that you want to know the answer to because you were afraid to before or didn't have a chance. Because now we've earned time to answer and ask questions that are sort of outside of what we discussed already. Go ahead. Lab is 6 hours long. 6 hours long for my local class. You guys can be in there as long as you want. Don't ever leave. And in terms of that 6 hours, there are breaks built in for you to go get some food and drink. So you will have the opportunity to do that. What I would say is if you feel like I need food sooner than that or drink sooner than that, that's fine. Have the food or the drink in your bag where I can't see it and the other lab instructors can't see it, because apparently if we can't see it, it doesn't exist. So what you want to do is keep it in there because we're really not allowed to have food or drink in here. But what you can do is step out real quick into the hallway. You can eat and drink a little bit out there and come right back in, and that's totally fine. Does that make sense? So if you need food sooner than the break, please, by all means, take care of that. But what you don't want to do is, hey, we're going to Burger King. See you guys in about a half or so. No, that's a bad idea. But if you're like me and you're fairly hungry quite a bit, you may want to travel with, loaded with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I did that for a long time. Still kind of do. But point being, you can of course eat and drink when you need to. I would never keep you from that. That's a great question. Thank you. And again, my online friends, just to give you an idea, they have 18 hours of scheduled lab time each week. 18, and it's not enough. Not enough. So just kind of build that into your thought process. How much time should I be putting into this? It's a lot. Any other questions? Yes. Every time you try to open it? Interesting. Did you download the right version of it? Okay, because there's like a PC version and a okay, you got the Apple one, because yeah, if you try to launch the wrong one, that'll do it. We will take a look at that in the lab, because that's where we can do more individualized attention and make sure that's working. Does that make sense? You're not on an island, we can help you. Where you get into trouble is when you wait until the last minute to turn in your work, and that's when all the technical problems seem to happen, and then you're in a lot of trouble. Does that make sense? Not necessarily local, because we're a little bit more accessible for help, but for my online friends, they're like, this stuff is due in about 4 hours. That should be more than enough time. No way. Does that make sense? You're not going to get it done. And that's where you have the technical problems. Honestly, even uploading your files to FSO to turn them in, sometimes that can take 40 minutes. So if you're waiting till 11:59 to turn this stuff in, you are going to be crying. You're going to be sweating. Does that make sense? Don't do it. My personal recommendation, let's say you're working until the last minute. Please don't. But let's just say you decide, because you just love the thrill and perspiration of that kind of dire situation. And there are people who live on that, sick monkeys. But let's say you really love that last minute stuff. If the work is due at midnight, stop working at 11. Start checking your files. Are they named properly? Break out your self-grade document. Go through the things we're looking for. Make sure you do those things because they are 60-something% of your grade, right? How it looks, only 34. So get those other points, make sure you got everything, and then start uploading to FSO. Because again, it can take up to 40 minutes to upload. Because guess what? There's a lot of other students going, it's 11:59, and they're trying to shove it under the door too. Does that make sense? So pipeline's only so big, so make sure you get that stuff in early. Now, if you get it uploaded and it's good to go, can you work on it for 20 minutes more and then turn in another one? Yeah, that's totally fine. Does that make sense? Totally fine. Please turn in another one if you think you can do a better job with the 20 minutes you got left. At least you've turned in something on time. Make sense? Okay, now, in terms of working ahead, you heard me say, work ahead, work ahead, work ahead. Watch videos ahead. Learn, study, do as much as you can in advance. What I would say is, do that, but show us the work before you actually submit it. Does that make sense? I have students who are like, I love this, I don't even want to sleep, and they just work all day and all night long, and it's awesome. Go for it. Don't go crazy, but go for it. But show us the work before you turn it in, because what happens is sometimes through the course of the class, you'll be like, oh, you know what? I didn't quite get that from the video. I didn't understand it, but now I got it. And wow, I've already turned that in. So, you can have like 37 versions you turned in. So what I would say is please work ahead, but show us your work and say, hey, I'm thinking of turning this in for week 2. Am I off the mark or what? How am I doing? Just so we can tell you. Does that make sense? Okay. So everything's out there, it's accessible, but what you're hearing a lot of is A, write stuff down, B, show us your stuff, show us your work. Everybody, well, not everybody, but the overwhelming majority of you are beginners, and we know that. So don't be ashamed, don't be afraid. We can help you if you let us. So let us see your work, show us what you're doing, we can help you. If you're struggling, that's what we're here for. And believe me, there are no dumb questions. And honestly, I have taught all kinds of people how to do this, tons. And I'm very proud of some of the individuals who were absolutely technically inept that I was able to teach how to use this application. This one student, before Brian joined the team, she had difficulty operating a phone, like literally too technologically advanced was the phone. And she really wanted to learn Maya. And she took my class and actually turned in one of the best projects we had had at that point. She did an amazing job. Big surprise, she wrote everything down. She did the activities and the exercises, and she did amazing. But there was no end to the people who walked up to me and said, you taught her how to use Maya? Oh boy, because they were betting that she couldn't do it. And she did, because she refused to quit. She tried super hard. She took expansive notes, and she did great. I was very proud of her and what she did. Anybody can do this. You can, but you have to put in the time. It's a lot of work, but you can do it if you want to. Everybody has the ability to be able to do this. It's just, will you put in the time to be successful? Or can you put in the time to be successful? It's entirely possible. You just can't put in that kind of time. That is going to make this really, really hard. Anything else? Those are great questions. I love those. Go ahead.
Is lab here or is it in another room?
Actually, I believe lab is in here for my local class. I think it immediately follows. Let me double check that because I don't want to tell you something that's not true. I hate that. It is in here? Okay. So you guys who are in my local class, you will be right here. Marcus and Sarah will show up and they'll be like, hi. And then that'll be Sarah, not Marcus. He doesn't sound like that. But they're going to come right in here and start working with you guys. And so you don't even have to go anywhere, slackers. But that's good and bad. I don't know, the same room for a long time sometimes freaks me out. Get some oxygen a little bit, go outside, breathe some fresh air. That's another great question. Anybody else got one? Oh, incidentally, my online buddies, Brian, when are your office hours this month?
1 to 3. Right.
1 to 3 before lecture. So from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. In the Google Hangout, you can see Brian for some live one-on-one help, and that's guaranteed times. Also, there's peer tutors, which are students who got a B or better in this class and came to me and said, hey, you know what? I'd really like to help people be successful in this because it's hard, and it's good to have somebody you can lean on for help. And I was like, oh, I would love to have you on board. People are here to help you guys, and they're on there too. So their hours are posted on FSO, so you can see when they're around. Take advantage of that. Get some help because they can definitely help you. All you have to do is make sure you download and install Google Chrome as your browser because the other browsers are not recognized by Google Help. It doesn't like it, but if you, or the Google Hangout, but if you've got Chrome and you use that as your browser, you're good to go. And incidentally, in case you were wondering, yes, Google Chrome is free. Yes, we gave you the links for it so that you can download it and install it. And guess where it is? It's on FSO, that's right. So you can get all that stuff on FSO. So again, make sure you're familiar with FSO. I kind of built that to be the all-encompassing everything you need to know thing. So if you are familiar with it, you know where the information you need is. So use it, go back to it again and again. Oftentimes you will find the answers to your questions there. So that's a great resource if you can't get a hold of somebody live because email is kind of slow. Email responses, we do everything we can to get back to you within 24 hours. Okay, who wants to wait 24 hours for an answer? Nobody, right? Because it's not text messaging, it's email. So I'm not like waiting in a box somewhere. I got a message. Yeah, there's stuff going on for me too. So you need immediate help, you go to the Google Hangout. That is the best place to get the help anyway, but that's where you get that immediate gratification. Go to the Google Hangout. Make sense? Okay. In my local class, you guys are welcome in there too. That's not just for my digital friends. You guys can be digital too. Go ahead. It's not an account thing at all. You literally just go there. You're good. But they're free to set up. Yeah. Nope. As long as you don't have highly inappropriate avatars and stuff on there. Yeah, half the class just went, uh-oh, I guess I gotta change my.
One thing is if your phone and stuff is, you know, your phone numbers and your contacts are backed up on your Google account, you might want to create a new one for it just because then people will have your phone number.
Yeah, if you have like an Android phone, people can ping you on that and basically call you through the Hangout on your phone. That's why I have an individual. People don't do that.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's one to grow on. Incidentally, that's Marcus and Sarah. Everybody say hi. These guys are going to be your best friends this month. Right there. All right. So we're good. We went through everything we needed to do. Was there anything else you guys wanted to add? Yeah, go ahead. Option and right mouse button is zoom in and out. You just hold down the right mouse button and move your mouse if you're using a mouse. If you're trying to use just the trackpad, I think it's 2 fingers and drag is how you get it. Yeah, that's what you got to do. Oh, the track and dolly is middle mouse button held down, which I don't know how to do on the trackpad. Do you know what the?
You don't do it on the trackpad, but you can go under view in the menu right above the camera. You can go to camera tools.
Oh, okay.
There's a workaround for a mouse or your tablet.
Yes, by far. You know, and like I said, you'll get away with it today. This is the one and only day that if you don't have your pen set up or a mouse, you're going to be all right. But every class after this, you will be absolutely hating yourself if you don't have either your pen set up or a mouse to get you through this. Okie dokie? That's a great question. Thank you for asking. Go ahead. All of the assignments due dates are on FSO and they're literally on there right now. So you can put them into your calendar or whatever you want to do because they're all there. So be sure you check them.
Mine's freaking out about the phone thing. They didn't hear.
Oh, the phone thing. Oh, well, what? No, don't panic, my digital friends. What Marcus was saying is if you have a Google account already, you might want to create one just for while you're here at school, because people might be able to access your phone number if that information is all built into that account. So what you're going to want to do is just make one up for class time, and then,
What'll happen is, I'll come over there.
yeah, no, that's fine. Come on. They haven't met you yet.
Talk to his buddy.
That's right there. That's Marcus.
Hello. So basically, if you have an Android phone, it'll have Google information on there. So they won't actually give your phone number through that. But like Google Hangouts over there. Does he?
Yeah.
Can they still hear me?
No, they cannot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're killing me.
I know.
Hold on. I wanted to put you on the screen while you were talking.
I'll talk like this so that they can hear me. Okay, guys, so I know you can't see me anymore because Steve walked away. But basically, if you have an Android phone, the Google Hangout will allow people to call you through one of the Google apps on your phone. So they won't get access to your phone number, but they will still be able to make calls. So if you make a new account that's not linked to your phone, that won't happen. So
It's also
just a heads up.
if you've Ever had an Android phone?
Yeah.
Not just have an Android phone.
Well, they need to have the Google stuff on there.
Everybody good? Was there anything else you guys? Yes. You probably just have to click on something else on the web page. It sounds like you've highlighted it. Alrighty, guys. Thank you very much. Good lecture today. I hope you learned a lot and you had fun. Oh, no, you don't. I appreciate that, but you don't have to do that. I'm here for you guys. So I hope you learned a lot. Again, this is kind of the pace. There's a lot to talk about and a lot to do. So bring your A game every day. Try to eat well. Get as much sleep as you reasonably can. Drink water. You know, it seems like simple stuff, but you really got to be alert and with it every day. You can't really have an off day for the next 2 years. So just bring your A game every day you can, okay? Because it's going to make a difference. And take notes, because no matter how tired you are, if you get that stuff written down, you're good. As the class progresses, you get more tired and it's harder to remember stuff. You don't function as well. So anything that's been, carved into stone, you're always going to have, and you can go back to it. All right. Thank you very much. I will see you on Wednesday. Make sure you either have your pen set up or a mouse. You're going to need it. We get busy early. Bye, guys. Good luck. Good night. Thank you.